Hello, and welcome to this virtual theater talk for the Roundabout Theater Company and Atlantic Theater Company's co production of English by Sanaz Toossi. My name is Leah Reddy, and I'm a teaching artist with Roundabout's Education Department. I'm speaking to you today from the current and ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape people.
Hi, my name is Kareem Muasher. I'm also a teaching artist with Roundabout's Education Department, and I'm also calling in from the current and ancestral land of the Lenni Lenape people.
Kareem, I am so excited to have you here for your first theater talk. And I know you're really excited about this particular play. So, should we dive right
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the playwright of English is Sanaz Toossi. This is her first big major New York production. She is an Iranian American playwright. She was raised in Orange County, California. Her MFA is from NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and she is the recipient of several major commissions, one of which was the Shonda Rhimes Commission back in 2019. And one of the things she said when she got that commission about her writing and about the plays that she writes is that when she started writing plays, she was trying to bridge the gap between her Iranianness and her Americanness. But she believes now that when she's writing about Iran, she's really writing about America, and these two parts of her identity aren't supposed to be separate.
I really respond to that idea of these two parts of identity. I was raised mostly in the United States, but I come originally from Jordan and Lebanon, and that struggle to define oneself and make sense of these two different things. I think that's very common, and it absolutely shows up in this play.
So I think that's a really interesting place to begin looking at her work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. There's not a lot of work to speak of yet, because, as you said, this is her first major production. But we can certainly look to one other play of hers. It's called "Wish You Were Here," and I'm just going to read to you a bit from the plot synopsis. So it reads: It's 1978, and protests are breaking out all across Iran, encroaching on this suburb where a tight knit circle of girlfriends plans weddings, trades dirty jokes, and tries to hang on to a sense of normalcy. But as the revolution escalates, each woman is forced to join the wave of emigration or face an equally uncertain future at home.
Mm.
So that sounds very interesting. That sounds wonderful. There's a couple links that I'm seeing already between this play and English. Of course, it's also set in Iran. It's also a historical piece, so it's not taking place in the present day in Iran. And it also features a lot of female characters. So in English, we have 5 characters, 4 of which are female characters, and then we have 1 male character. And in this play, it's an all-female cast. It's 5 female characters in this play. It was first produced by the Williamstown Theater Festival in 2020, so recently. And because of the pandemic, the festival actually produced this play and all of their plays that season as audio plays. So you can actually find this as an audio play online. But in a very exciting development, what a year for Sanaz Toossi. A few months after English premieres, Wish You Were Here will also have its live production premiere in New York. It will be premiering at Playwrights Horizon in April 2022. So you can go and see both shows if you like.
That's fantastic. I'm very excited for both productions.
Yeah.
So I want to give us a little bit of context, socio-political, economic context for English. Um, because as both Sanaz and the director of this production, Knud Adams, say, this play is not overtly political, but it's still important to understand the circumstances in which these characters are making decisions for themselves and for their families, deciding about their future. So English is set in an English language school in Karaj, Iran in 2008. Iran's formal name is the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's a country in the Middle East. It's between Iraq and Pakistan, has about 85 million people. It's always been sort of at a crossroads culturally and historically and physically. So that diversity is reflected in the demographics of modern Iran. About 50% of Iranians are ethnic Persians. Persian Farsi is the official language of Iran. And 99% of Iranians are Muslim. The majority of them are Shia Muslims. So, as you might have picked up, in ancient times, Iran is the heart of the Persian Empire, which has a long and storied history that is way beyond the scope of this talk. We're going to fast forward. So, for about 2,500 years, Iran was ruled by dynastic monarchies until 1906, when there's something called the Constitutional Revolution of Iran, in which it transforms into being a constitutional monarchy. So, in theory, power sharing between a monarch and a parliament that is democratically elected. Moving into the middle of the 20th century, we're going to talk about the 1950s because a couple of important conflicts and ideas really come to a head here that are going to continue to be playing out in Iran into 2008. So during World War II, Reza Shah, who was the head of the Pahlavi dynasty, was deposed by the Allied forces who sent troops to secure Iran and use it to direct supplies to Russia. His son Mohammad Reza Shah was crowned the new Shah. When World War II ended, there was a political opening and a power struggle between the parliament and supporters of the Shah and the monarchy. A group of constitutionalists advocated for executive power and policy making to be dictated by the prime minister and the popularly elected parliament, rather than the Shah and his court. Mohammad Mossadegh, the prime minister, was the leader of this movement. He also pushed for the nationalization of the Iranian oil industry and seizing control away from the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, today's BP. In 1953, the British MI5 and US CIA worked together to depose Mossadegh in a military coup and bring the Shah back to power. Mossadegh and his supporters were put on trial, and the Shah led an authoritarian push to modernize Iran and align it with the US in the Cold War. This modernization program is known as the White Revolution. So, with the White Revolution comes two questions that come to a head in Iran. What is the national character of Iran? How Western is it going to be? How Islamic is it going to be? And the second question is, how is it going to be governed? As I said, the Shah was suppressing dissent. There was a fair amount of use of secret police to keep people in line. There was a fair amount of corruption in his government. So you have a lot of people, a lot of ordinary Iranians, whether they be on the left or the right politically, who are not happy with the situation. So in the late 1970s, after several years of major protests, riots, worker strikes, this whole coalition has come together with one goal, which is to depose the Shah. And in 1979, it works. He leaves. Ayatollah Khomeini becomes the leader of Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini is part of a conservative religious group. So he's a religious conservative, he's a cleric. And between 1979 and 1981, the right, so politically conservative, religious, gains power and solidifies their power in Iran. And the leftist influences, who also participated in the revolution, get pushed aside. And Iran is, starting in 1979, a theocratic republic. So it is essentially a theocracy based on Islamic law, or all of the laws in Iran are compatible with Islamic law.
Wow. What I really respond to about that is that so much of what you're talking about, some of the historical tensions in Iran, are showing up in 2008 when this play is taking place. They're just coming back again in different ways. So I can talk a little bit about the world of the play in 2008, what's going on in Iran. So 2008 was a year of tension for Iran in many ways that connect to what you were just talking about. So first, there's international relations. For several years leading up to 2008, there had been rumors and growing evidence that Iran was secretly developing nuclear weapons. So by 2008, the UN Security Council had adopted 3 separate resolutions that sanctioned Iran economically for this program. And keep in mind, this is before Barack Obama became the 44th US president and started to negotiate the famous 2015 Iran nuclear deal. So at this point in time, no one knew where this was going to lead, this tension over the nuclear program. Now, at the same time, there's also a lot happening economically in Iran. The UN sanctions actually didn't significantly affect Iran's economy because they were selling crude oil for record prices.
Mm.
But some other factors did. So At this time, the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, he boosted social spending to, in his words, bring the oil money to people's dinner tables. Uh, but what happened because of this is that Iranian inflation doubled. So it went from 15% all the way up to 30% inflation. I know. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I know we have some inflation now, but 30% seems unmanageable.
That's right. I can't even imagine. So Iran, of course, tries to counter this with several policies, including flooding the market with cheap imports, giving people cheap things to buy. While this did help to bring down inflation, at the same time, it increased unemployment.
Okay.
But it didn't increase unemployment for everyone equally. People in positions of power in Iran, they received the greatest benefits from the oil revenue, while the lower and middle classes felt the effects of the poor housing and job markets. Might sound similar to what we've experienced in the US in certain times in our history. Uh,
Yeah.
in fact, between 2005 and 2007, uh, the income of the top 20% in Iran rose more than 4 times as fast as that of the bottom quintile. So you're seeing huge economic inequality in 2008. The third factor that's causing a lot of tension in Iran at this time gets to something you were talking about earlier. What kind of government do we want to have? How do we treat our citizens? What is the role of religion in our national culture? So Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was elected the president of Iran in 2005, in part because he pledged to return to the core values of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. And so once he came to power, the government began to invoke issues of national security as a way to justify silencing any kind of dissent among Iranian citizens. So they suppressed freedom of expression and opinion. They arrested journalists who didn't speak favorably or write favorably of the government. They controlled what was published. They monitored and controlled what was taught in schools and universities. They monitored what was on the internet and banned websites that were critical of the government. They even targeted activists. So in one case, there was this thing called the 1 million signatures campaign, which was led by female activists in Iran who were looking to gather signatures in support of reforming Iranian laws to lessen discrimination against women. These women were arrested and prosecuted by the Iranian government because, in the Iranian government's words, they were disturbing public opinion, publishing lies, and creating false news. So this third factor of tension, I imagine, is really weighing quite heavily on a lot of the female characters in particular in the show.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that all these things are affecting the characters in the show and specifically the character's decision to pursue English as a foreign language, which takes us into talking a little bit about what exactly is going on at this foreign language school. The students are studying for something called the TOEFL, or the Test of English as a Foreign Language, which is a standardized test used to measure the ability of non native speakers wishing to enroll in English speaking universities around the world. Today, it is administered by the Educational Testing Service. You find folks who also bring you the GRE and the Praxis.
So I spoke to a couple people, actually, quite a few, who have taken the TOEFL. I was doing research for an article about bilingualism and how it relates to the play. And quite a few of them told me that it was one of the hardest things they've ever done. So, yeah, just imagine a standardized test and now imagine it in a language that is not your first language.
I cannot imagine. That would be terrible.
It's not imaginable, terrifying. So it's split into 3 sections: listening comprehension, structure and written expression, and vocabulary and reading comprehension. According to US News, the average minimum score to get into US universities, if you're coming from a non English speaking country, is 78. But at very competitive universities, it can be much higher. So at NYU, it's at least 100. And at Columbia, it's 105. So that's approaching a near perfect score. So
Yeah.
I imagine there's a lot of pressure on these characters to do well on that test.
Yes. Yes.
So I've got one example question for you, Leah. Here it is. Vegetables are an excellent source blank vitamins. And then the TOEFL gives you four possible answers. The answers are have, of, where, and contain. And what I find really interesting about this question is that, so we can tell, of course, that the answer is of, but the fourth possible answer, contain, it's not wrong in the meaning. Vegetables do contain vitamins, but this question is getting really specific into the grammar, the structure of the English language. So it's really asking people to have uh, almost perfect English skills.
Yeah, that's hard. That's very hard. So I think we've set folks up for everything they need to know to sort of have a deep, rich experience watching English. I'm curious, what are you most excited to see in the play?
So much, I'm excited about to see this play. I would say the first thing is I really respond to what you were talking about earlier about the play not being directly political. So, having the opportunity to see a play with Middle Eastern characters that is not focusing on Middle Eastern or global politics directly, I think just broadens our understanding of Middle Eastern people in a really beautiful way. Uh, the second thing that I'm really excited about and really curious about is the use of the English language itself in the play. So, in the play, the characters speak English sometimes, and then sometimes they speak Farsi. But it's represented in a unique way. So when they speak English, that's represented on stage by the actors speaking English with different levels of accent and difficulty. When they speak Farsi, for the most part, it's represented by still having the actors speak English, but simply speaking English with perfect English accents, with perfect American English accents. So we're seeing them speak English with difficulty when they're supposed to be speaking English, and then with no difficulty when they're speaking Farsi. So it's a really unique way to represent multiple languages on stage. Uh, and I'm really curious to see how audiences are going to respond to it and how it's going to affect how all of us receive the play and connect to it.
And how, yes, especially because so many New Yorkers speak multiple languages and are conversant or fluent in two or more languages, will they be able to empathize with the moments where the characters are really comfortable in English, showing that comfort of their mother tongue? I think that's going to be really, really interesting. And I'm so glad to see this play and to welcome this playwright to the New York stage.
Yeah, me too. Welcome. Welcome, Sanaz.
Glad we could be the welcome wagon.
Yeah.
So, as we said, this is a co production between Roundabout Theater Company and Atlantic Theater Company. It opens on February 4th, 2022 at the Linda Gross Theater. And please enjoy the show. Thank you so much for being with us. Oh, if you want any more information, including an interview with the playwright, with the director, more info about the background of Iran, Kareem's awesome article about bilingualism, you can check out www.roundabouttheater.org/upstage for the Upstage Playgoers Guide. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.